Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 6 p.m. Time to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Dexter Township for June 23rd, 2026. Before we start on the agenda, I will invite you to join me, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Secretary Meyer, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Abbott,
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Hurd,
Here.
Commissioner Straub,
Here.
Commissioner Barry,
Here.
Chair Birch,
Here.
and Commissioner Mayer is here also, Secretary Mayer. I'd also like to note for the record that Fletcher Reiher is here, the Director of Planning and Zoning, and Janice Miller, our Recording Secretary, as well as Brady Heath from Carlisle Workman.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Now, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any suggestions as to additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda as it has been presented to us? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Abbott,
Support Smith.
support by Commissioner Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a conflict of interest review. Does any planning commissioner have any possible conflict of interest with anything that is on the agenda as presented? Hearing none, we shall proceed. Our next item is public comment. Members of the public, you are invited to speak to speak to the planning commission regarding any item that is not on the agenda. If it is regarding something that is on the agenda, we will give you the opportunity to address the planning commission at that time. Public? We are just joined by two additional members of the public. Gentlemen, we are at the point of public comment on anything that is not on the agenda. And apparently there is no public comment. We have no public hearing scheduled this evening. So our first item of action item is discussion and recommendation to the Township Board on the proposed zoning ordinance amendment to modify bed and breakfast definition and a short-term rental definition. DPZ Reiher, would you please present this item to the Planning Commission?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Fletcher Reiher, Director of Planning and Zoning. Over the past few months, this commission has been reviewing some draft ordinance language to modernize our bed and breakfast ordinance. Brady and I have made some modifications to that language based on our May discussion. I will pass the microphone over to Brady to go over those handful of minor modifications, and then we can discuss those changes and answer any questions as those come up.
Thank you, DPZ Reiher. Rick?
Good evening. So the following changes were made based on our last meeting feedback. There was modifications to the bed and breakfast definition, to say with a rental period of up to 30 consecutive days. And that was also changed for the short-term rental definition as well. In section 17.09 K9, guest was changed to renter. And then we continued the language for a period of up to 30 consecutive days for that standard. In section 1709 K12, added an inspection shall be conducted prior to appearing before the planning commission and shall occur every 3 years. And then 17.09 K13, flow was changed to demand. We have included a red line copy and a clean copy.
Thank you. Before I open the floor to planning commissioners for questions, I do have one on K9. The copy I have says a renter shall not stay at a bed and breakfast for a period up to 30 consecutive days. That almost sounds like a double negative to me. Would you care to reword that, make it?
Yes, we can do that.
Moving not.
Yes.
Change the shall not to may or something.
Planning commissioners, you have any questions for our consultant? Commissioner Stroud.
Mr. Chair, I just, I don't know, got a small handful of mostly typo, non-substantive type things, but I'm going off the red copy, so follow along on that. Under the first non-struck through bed and breakfast, a single family residential, blah, blah, blah. For consistency, it looks like throughout the document, otherwise we have single hyphen family. So as long as we're consistent with whatever we're doing there, next line down, may have to ask the advice of our former teacher, but we go on to say with the rental period of 30 consecutive days, which is the owner, in parentheses S, principal place of residence. That should be owner with a possessive S. And I'm not sure how you want to make that plural in the parentheses, but I understand what you're trying to accomplish there. On the next page, top of the page, events, and this is unchanged apparently. Receptions, private parties, The number of events may be limited based on the size of the lot and the potential impact on the adjacent properties. Is that through an event permit, or how would the township regulate events that may take place in conjunction with the use of a bed and breakfast?
So the township does have special event permits available. It's mostly used in a commercial context. In this case, you're right. The township, it would be difficult to regulate this. However, parking would be the main factor when it comes to this. We wouldn't want cars lining the roads and blocking the flow of traffic in our neighborhoods. We could strike this out entirely because single-family homes, residential spaces are allowed to have private parties. However, we don't want those to get out of hand and to promote large-scale events at these bed and breakfasts.
Did we say or imply elsewhere that only the people who are actually staying at the bed and breakfast, I guess we're calling renters, that no one else is allowed to be on the premises, which would then by default, I guess, kind of define it as not an event. I'm not sure, just as long as we have consistency, I think we all understand what we're trying to achieve, as long as we make that clear in the way we're going about it. I think that was the last thing that I had on this item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To comment on
Commissioner
that briefly, I think the only place that's mentioned is in that event section. You know, the planning commission could consider just striking the second sentence entirely. The first sentence allows these receptions and private parties limited to the guests of the B and B. The second sentence kind of opens up the township to enforcement challenges and some review that we may not want to take on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And in addition to that, these are reviewed as a special land use. This commission would have the ability to levy conditions on an approval. And part of that special land use approval could touch on these types of events.
Other planning commission members?
I had a typo or question about section 11. It lists a number of things that have to be in the application. And at one point it says a site plan that includes parking, landscaping, and floor plans of the residential dwelling unit, illustrating that the proposed operation meeting the requirements of this section. I think it might be better to read meets instead of meeting. That was it from me.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I guess in that same section, just for consistency, we should either capitalize the B for bed and the B for breakfasts throughout or not. We've got a mixture. Either capital B bed and capital B breakfasts or not throughout.
Hold on, we'll put down here. There you go. There you go. Is that good? You want it down here? You want it down here?
Thank you, Commissioner Straub. Any further discussion? DPZ, do you have any further requests of the planning commission to help you prepare this for presentation or approval for it by us before we send it to the board?
The last question I have is what this commission thinks we should do with the events section. Whether you think we should strike the second sentence or keep it there. Like I said, during the special land use review process, we could dive into this specific situation in more detail and determine based on parking spaces available, how big of a private event could potentially occur with the guests staying at the property.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Straub.
I move that we strike that second sentence under number 6 events. So we would remove the sentence that says the number of events may be limited based on the size of the lot and the potential impact on the adjacent properties.
Thank you, Commissioner Straub. As Commissioner Straub made that into a motion, do we have support?
I'll support Mayor.
It's been moved and supported that we strike under paragraph 6, the number of events may be limited based on the size of the lot and the potential impact on the adjacent properties. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of striking that sentence, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. That sentence is to be removed. Any further comment before we leave this topic?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Straub,
Just a procedural question. So with that struck, everything else is really a typo or a couple of clarifications. Is the planning commission ready to just recommend this or not to the Township Board of Trustees with those changes being incorporated? Or do we need this to come back to us at our next meeting for our final review?
excellent question, Commissioner Straub, and I'm going to defer that question to our Director of Planning and Zoning and ask him how, if he is comfortable submitting it with the changes that we've made this evening. Or do you want to rewrite it to a formal proposal for us to submit?
I think I'm comfortable moving forward with a board ordinance. I took notes of all of the items that we needed to change. And we will thoroughly go through this ordinance to make sure those are all done prior to going.
Thank you. That being said, then I believe that we are ready for a motion to submit the bed and breakfast ordinance as modified to the Township Board.
I'll move.
Second.
It has been moved by Secretary Meyer, supported by Commissioner Abbott, to send the modified bed and breakfast ordinance to the Township Board. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Straub.
I would just like to reiterate what I have stated several times previously, that while I do not think that this is a perfect or the ultimate long-term solution, I think it's a good step in the right direction that will clarify for anyone looking at the township ordinance what the township's position not only is, but has been. It was quite fuzzy before. So we're doing the right thing, at least in increments.
Thank you, Commissioner Straub. Any further discussion? Hearing none. The motion on the floor is to submit to the Township Board the bed and breakfast ordinance as has been modified by us this evening. All in favor indicate aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. And next item on our agenda moves to item 9A. A review and discussion of draft Article 4 and Section 16.36 ordinance language. DPZ Rare.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. At the last Planning Commission, staff presented to you some minor draft ordinance language to Article 4, which is our schedule of uses, and Section 16.36, uses specifically not listed, to cross-reference Article 4 to Section 16.36, which goes over land uses not listed in that schedule of uses. As it currently stands, Section 16.36 allows the Director of Planning and Zoning to interpret land uses not listed in the schedule of uses to a similar listed land use. And for that land use to be reviewed under the standards of that listed land use. During our last discussion, there was some concerns of how that process works. That process allows the ZBA to step in if there's an interpretation dispute between the applicant and the Director of Planning and Zoning. What we have proposed is the original proposal, just additional language, cross-referencing the two articles, and a new amendment, which would put the interpretation process in front of this group. So to put this into practice, Article 4 isn't an all-encompassing schedule of uses. There will be some newer uses that come out that are not reflected currently. If somebody comes to me, the land use not listed, we would have them with this new process come in front of this board to be interpreted to a listed land use. And this group would determine whether it should be permitted by right, by a special land use, or as an accessory permitted use. One, I will say with this new approach being presented tonight, it could be seen as a more transparent process, having a group of appointed officials review these requests as they come in. Also, it would give this group the ability to levy conditions on these land uses not listed. I did provide a red line copy of the original draft language as well as the new draft language. And Brady and I would be happy to walk you through this or answer any questions you may have regarding these two processes.
Thank you, DPZ and speaking for myself, I think it would be very useful if you and our consultant were to walk us through these changes so that we understand collectively what we're asking here.
Sure. So let's start with what's currently outlined in the zoning ordinance. So for uses that aren't listed in Article 4, an applicant can come to the planning department and ask for
What's that?
their land use
What you
to be
doing?
reviewed.
What's
In that
that?
process, I would look at the land use
It's good.
and see if it's comparable to any listed land use in the standards that are currently listed for the similar land use. I would look at parking, traffic impact, water and utility impact, stormwater impact, noise, odor, and glare impact. If I don't find the land use to be similar to a listed land use and be able to be reviewed under those standards that are existing, I would deny the applicant. The applicant would, however, have the ability to appeal my decision to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Let's say, for example, they went to the ZBA and the ZBA said, yes, this land use is similar to, let's just say, for example, motels. Well, they would then need to come back to this group for a site plan review and go through the review process based on the standards outlined for motels, as well as looking at parking, traffic impact, noise, odor, glare, etc. With the alternative approach, the applicant would come to me and I would put them in front of this board immediately for review. Staff would go staff would create a staff report looking at what's being proposed. And if it's compatible with a listed land use currently in the ordinance. And this group would make the decision whether or not they agree that it's a similar land use and can be reviewed under existing criteria, whether it be a permitted land use, special land use, or accessory permitted land use. This language is currently in the City of Dexter zoning ordinance. I added language from their ordinance, but I also included language from our current ordinance and their ordinance, because I do think the current ordinance, looking at parking,
Where'd you go?
traffic impact, utility impact, stormwater impact, all of that is extremely important. At the last meeting, this group also mentioned why not have the master plan consistency be a part of that review as well. That was also added to the draft language proposed to you tonight.
Thank you, DPZ Rare. Commissioners?
Sure.
Commissioner Straub?
Just philosophically, I believe that most decisions should be made by those who are most closely answerable to the electorate. I'm not comfortable when we shove that too far away. And some of you may recall that when I was chair of the Planning Commission, I promoted a change that would, and some of these are pretty much statutory, that if somebody was able to accomplish everything, all the boxes are checked, then we must grant whatever the permit is. But I was much more comfortable that final decision is made in conference with DPZ and the township supervisor or their designee, rather than DPZ and chair of the planning commission. And the thought is that at least one of those people is directly elected by our residents, and the other person works directly for that person. Planning commission, while we might, think that we know a lot about these things, the real expert is going to be DPZ. And we are appointed for staggered 3-year terms, except in the case of whoever the ex officio from the Township Board of Trustees is, which is a little bit different. Having said all that, it also seems to me that the first level of decision is made by, first level of determination, let's say, is made by DPZ. And maybe there's even a hybrid where, okay, this is pretty simple. This one might be more complicated, but also the more complicated ones, as Fletcher just said, have to come back for full site plan approval. So I don't know that we're short circuiting anything that would fall in the complicated, or, yeah, gosh, it seems like this thing is kind of like a manufacturing plant, but it's different enough to where it's going to have to be considered. Well, it's going to end up back at us anyhow. The simple ones, however, we can cut through a lot of bureaucracy, save a lot of time for people who are trying to accomplish something within the township that doesn't need to come here, because the expert is going to be right there. And some of these are, okay, some of them might be fuzzy. There's going to be a whole lot of them that are going to be at the simple end of things. So I don't see that everything ought to come here, but if somebody's not comfortable with nothing coming here, then I think that problem kind of takes care of itself, because we've got the simple stuff and the more difficult stuff, or the more complicated stuff. And the more complicated is going to require full site plan approval. So anyhow, whether it's, big, small, complex, simple, I think this can be laid out in a way to where first the expert and our expert reports directly to those who are elected. We don't actually report to anybody because we get appointed for 3 years at a time. Anyhow, that's my thought on it. I think there's a way to do this that really simplifies things, but we still go through the full review process when Fletcher sees that this is not a simple one. I can't really check all these boxes.
Is that all for them?
Other than that, I might just add that, changing that first line under the big heading. Thank you. That takes care of all of my concerns expressed in the previous meeting. And that's how we get into this, that not everything can possibly be covered in a simple table, but you have discretion to view those. And if there's something that, he gets hit up with a lot, then it's pretty simple for us to take that up as a zoning amendment. And okay, now we have to acknowledge whatever we're not foreseeing sitting here in the year 2026. So I don't see that there's any huge downside to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Straub. Other commissioners? Commissioner Hurd.
So a question for DPZ. Have you ever had an application for a type of use come to you that was not on the schedule of uses? Has this ever been presented to you, either here or maybe in a former position?
No, I personally have never been through this process with a unique use that couldn't be reviewed under the schedule of uses. I also spoke with Brady this morning during our weekly meeting, and he has yet to do that as well. So this is a very unique situation when a very new or unheard of use comes before us.
Because in my personal opinion, I completely trust our DPZ to make these type of decisions as it's been outlined in our ordinance, or how it is outlined in the ordinance currently. But the alternative presented, it does allow for that transparency, the accountability. There's going to be hardly any volume of applications of this type since there hasn't been anything in the past come before you. We may see it. And if it doesn't come before us that often, it does allow for some public input, some public comment for a potential use that's not listed anywhere. So, I mean, I could really go either way in this scenario because I do trust staff to make these decisions, but I also would love for the public to be aware that this use is being presented if it is a significant type of use and not in the schedule of uses. So I could go either way based on the rest of your feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Hurd. Commissioner Abbott?
No, I didn't. I was pointing to Commissioner Hurd because I didn't know if you knew she had a comment. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I had a question.
Commissioner Meyer.
Since I understand that it is rare, but assumably if the DPZ said this is similar enough and the applicant wanted to appeal to the ZBA, then that would be a public vetting of the whole idea. So that would, I think, satisfy the public vetting requirements or, considerations.
It would be a public hearing. The applicant would have to show us how said use meets all the standards as the similar use listed in the ordinance. And then it would need to come back in front of this board if it required a site planning commission review.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Straub.
kind of the flip side of the scenario that Commissioner Mayer just mentioned. I would not want to put our DPZ in a position where somebody would accuse the person holding that position of lack of transparency because it wasn't an open process. Now, I think given other comments, this is a rare occurrence, and anything of any scale would have a public vetting, most likely, through a whole site plan approval. But there is a downside to that, that there are people who will say, what the heck, he approved that. Well, that's nothing like that. And I wouldn't want to put him in that position. But I also think that given the rarity and given what I expect, the skill set will be in that position, whether it's Fletcher or whoever comes after Fletcher. That's probably just a calculated risk.
I have another question.
Commissioner Meyer.
In terms of process and also what the responsibilities are of the two commissions, the planning and ZBA, could it go right from the applicant directly to bypass you and go to the ZBA instead of us? Could they be the initial decider? Would they have the authority to do that? And the one reason I'm asking is honestly, my husband's on the ZBA and I feel like their workload is less than ours. And Marty and Sean can certainly weigh in on that. I feel like they don't meet as often as we do. I mean, in the winter, it's pretty quiet for the ZBA because there's not that many projects going on. Would that not be allowed under the law?
So as it currently stands, they are just there for, they are just there to appeal. And that's what they're there to do. They're there to review appeals to the zoning ordinance. They're there to interpret sections of the zoning ordinance that my position and applicants may have. I think this group and the planning department as a whole is more skilled with land uses. ZBA should just be used for appeals and dimensional variance requests.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
So just to follow up on Commissioner Meyer's comment there. If that's the scenario, would it be reasonable to look at this commission for appeals of just uses not listed? Maybe that's a rhetorical question. Maybe it's something just sort of internal to the group. But the idea being, if it does require additional, like you're saying, background experience and in working with our ordinance and the master plan, would an appeal process be the one time then? And so that gives you the administrative option. And if either you or the applicant wasn't comfortable with the direction that was going, it could come here, whether it's on appeal based on a decision made or by reference, meaning this should require larger discussion.
So I would advise against that just because they're appealing his decision, whether the land use is appropriate or not, or similar.
And it would contradict how the current appeal process throughout the ordinance is laid out. All appeals go through the ZBA. I do think the good news ultimately is that with a larger development that would require a site plan, it would eventually end up in front of this group. And depending on the type of review, conditions could be levied on that use from this body.
And the background on the reason that I'm sort of asking that and thinking this same thing is that the two pros that I see to the commission reviewing these are just the fact that there is a public participation option if it's something significant, although I question if that should be necessary for everything. And then also just the evaluation of the consistency with master plan. But that is proposed language that you listed here as number 6, where that could be a way to at least address and give you that option regarding the master plan when you look at it administratively. And then it also gives you one more opportunity where if you felt it's a use, because I'm not trying to question your judgment. It's really just, again, opportunity for input. And right there is a pretty big concept. So if it's not necessarily compliant with the master plan, it gives you the ability to say that. So I do, again, I support the concept that we're giving you the ability to make the decisions. I wish there was a way to address public when needed, but maybe because of the fact that the big ones would require a special use permit, that the only time something would come to you that is big, we would end up looking at publicly anyway. I guess that's sort of me saying I'm comfortable with your process as it stands, especially if we add the master plan terminology.
Sure. And just so the commission's aware, like I've stated previously, I have not been through this process since starting at Dexter Township, but it would be a formal process. It would be staff report generated for the applicant, like what you see for a site plan, going through all these criterias, and outlining what does meet it and what does not. Staff would present a formal review of said land use to the applicant as a part of this.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith? Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, there's a member of the public.
Were you allowed to?
You mentioned, yes, sir.
Paul Kissinger, 9841 Vernon Drive. Just a couple thoughts, on the list of criteria under the master plan. One of the things that you might want to consider about putting in there is neighborhood compatibility. That gives a lot of wiggle room with respect to land uses. If used car lot wants to come in next to residential, it might be an industrial zone that's near residential, but that's not really a compatible use next to it. So that might be a suggestion to put neighborhood compatibility in as the 7th criteria. And the other thing in my experience, sometimes what might happen in situations like this, I know it doesn't happen very often, maybe here in Dexter Township, but the scale of the project might be a way to differentiate between just Fletcher making the check in the boxes and see if that's use. Maybe that's a project that's under 5 acres or 2 acres or something like that. And then anything larger would come to this body. Because, and just looking at the list of uses, a data center is not a list on your list of uses in the industrial zone. So that would be likely a very big project, and that would automatically come here. And then you would either recommend for approval, which my understanding then that would go to the trustees to adopt. Or do you make the final decision on land uses?
No, the final decision is
Trustees.
made by our recommendation to the
Right.
trustees.
Okay, so then if you look at the data center, that's the big bugaboo these days. If that's not listed, that's currently not listed in your list of uses under industrial. And I don't think there's anything similar in the 3 uses that I just saw. There's a biofuel extraction, biofuel production, large and small. So that would be one, this is similar to how we're dealing with data centers, because someone could come in and say, well, hey, I want to do a data center in the industrial land use. That use isn't listed, if I've read it correctly. There's nothing in your list of uses that's similar to that. What do? That would then come to here instead of settling that with Fletcher. So the scale of the project might be one way to kind of delineate between things that he would do and the things that you would do as a body. So I just wanted to bring those up.
Thank you, Mr. Kissinger. Any other comments, planning commissioners? We seem to have run out of discussion on this item, so the chair will entertain a motion regarding the recommendation, draft Article 4 and Section 16.36 of the ordinance language. Commissioner Strauss.
Sure, just a question about what kind of motion are you seeking? This was just a discussion item tonight. Did you want a motion to have a more formal item set up for action at a future meeting?
Commissioner Straub, I think that would be an excellent idea. I believe our Director of Planning and Zoning has probably got enough information that he could put together a formal motion and recommendation that we could use for approval for not only the zoning ordinance, but if necessary to the township board.
In that case, I would move that we request the Director of Planning and Zoning to prepare this issue as an action item at a future meeting.
Second.
I was Commissioner Abbott?
Yeah.
It's been moved by Commissioner Straub, supported by Commissioner Abbott, to request the DPZ prepare this as an action item for our review at a future meeting. Is there any further discussion?
I have a question. So in terms of what Fletcher has presented here tonight, and then with the added comment from Mr. Kissinger, I mean, that would be like a bifurcated process where if we looked at the approach that Mr. Kissinger proposed, where a small project would go to you, a larger project would come to the commission. Am I understanding that correctly? So is that something you would consider as one of the options versus what we've already seen tonight? I mean, it would give extra work to you immediately in the near future to present yet a third option.
Well, if the commission thinks that staff should investigate the comments from tonight's meeting, I would recommend bringing another draft before you before we set any public hearing or have an action on this language.
I mean, to me, it's an interesting idea. So I don't know what the other commissioners feel like. If it's something worth exploring, if we should just say, you know, we have two and that's enough. Ms. Hurd, sorry. I'm looking right.
Well, I just know that your staff report gives us two different approaches. One is the current proposal, which the decision maker on these uses that are not listed is you. And the alternative approach where that decision maker is the planning commission. I don't really feel that there's been consensus here to give him enough direction on what approach we are really asking him to take as an action item.
Sure.
Commissioner Straub.
Therefore, and I agree, there hasn't really been a sense of direction out of here, but we have discussed simple, complex, small, big, a hybrid, either or. What I would expect is that when we ask them to prepare this for action at a future meeting, they take all that into consideration and come back with something that they think is incorporated appropriately. All of the comments that they've heard tonight from us, Mr. Kissinger, anything else that they might come up with between now and then. And that's what will be before us for some sort of action. Now, our action at that point can be, we can amend the heck out of it. We can vote it up, vote it down, but at least I think the concept is important enough that we do need to move it forward, even if it's not perfect. Because without that, the other action that we are recommending the Township Board of Trustees takes is we just defined something, but we didn't really address that there's this gap in our list. So to me, those two things preferably would go forward together, but given the year and a half plus that we've dealt with the short-term rental, I think the action that we're taking tonight is good, and I would expect that Township Board would appreciate having something to really act on and point to. But then this part of it needs to come right behind it, even if it's not perfect in its next form.
Thank you, Commissioner Strub.
Then my follow-up question would be to DPZ. Do you have enough information to put something together? Because it kind of sounds like a hybrid. Despite the current proposal, if you determine that a use is similar to a use listed, most likely it is going to come before us as a site plan, special land use, and anything smaller than that, I trust your judgment on the smaller things. So, I mean, I'm more apt to go with the current proposal, since anything larger would come before us anyway, unless you can incorporate some of those hybrid comments that were proposed tonight. And yes, I would definitely welcome that.
Sounds like staff could come back to the planning commission with the original draft language, and then a hybrid draft with these comments mentioned tonight. And then we can have another discussion. Once this commission feels comfortable with one or the other, we can move forward with a public hearing and action on that item.
I see significant number of heads shaking in the affirmative. Does someone care to call the question?
You can just call for a vote. The power vested in you.
We have a proposal on the floor to have the DPZ prepare a proposal for action item at a future meeting to define the response of the township in the case of applications that do not fit our basically our ordinance language. Because of the nature of this ordinance, I am going to ask for a roll call vote. Secretary Meyer, would you please?
Hey, baby, what you
Hold it.
doing? What you doing?
Trustee Abbott,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hurd,
Yes.
Commissioner Straub,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry,
Yes.
Secretary Mayor votes yes, and
Good.
Chair Birch.
Chair votes yes. Motion carries. Which brings us to our next item, item 9B on the agenda this evening, our review and discussion of draft data center ordinance language. DPZ Rare.
Richard Smith.
Good evening, planning commissioners. Today we have before you some draft ordinance language for data centers. I will start by saying that there's a current moratorium in place for any data centers locating here in Dexter Township. It was a 6-month pause on any type of application for this land use, with the ability to extend that moratorium an additional 6 months. From my discussions with the township supervisor, the board will be considering extending that moratorium at the following board meeting, which would give us until February to come up with some regulations and language for this type of land use. In addition to that, the township just hired on a new law firm to represent Dexter Township. Foster Swift is the new law firm representing Dexter Township. They are in possession of this draft language before you today. However, they have not yet had a chance to review it. I spoke with them on Monday, and they will be reviewing the language and providing comments and suggestions to this group at the July meeting. On top of that, I do think it would be beneficial for this group to go over some of the changes staff has made, as well as take comments from members of the public this evening. Also, I would recommend asking any questions you may have to the Township Legal Counsel regarding this ordinance. Staff could present that to them and come back in July with answers to the questions and comments you may have.
Thank you, DPC Rare. Before I proceed any further, Mr. Joseph Spiegel, an interested resident, I know has information he would like to share with us. Mr. Spiegel, I am very pleased to listen to your comments, but also please keep in mind that we are now before an attorney. And so we as a planning commission will probably not be doing much of anything until we have our attorney's advice.
I understand. Joseph Spiegel, 7905 Sauer, appearing as a resident, not as counsel. I have drafted a detailed memo with the assistance of Paul Kissinger and Linda Selbert regarding the approach to the existential threat facing Dexter from a data center and related entity development. The memo focuses on providing guidance to the dealing with and approval of a data center, a cyber mining, battery facility, or any such like facility. I set forth more than 40 questions for a developer, a dozen questions for new counsel. The memo requires a great deal of input from new counsel for Dexter Township. As Fletcher has said, they've only been recently retained. Out of respect for the chain of command and the role of elected officials, the memo, I believe, should be addressed to the supervisor and the executive committee, who will then determine, along with staff, how Dexter Township should proceed with regards to the issues raised in the memo regarding data centers and related facilities. The supervisor and executive committee and staff will then determine how and under what circumstances council should be brought in. The issue of data centers and regulation of data centers is a legal, not primarily a policy issue, as Commissioner Hurd and Abbott have heard before. There's a need to coordinate with Master Planning Committee, Council, the Planning Commission, but at the same time to engage a community outreach with information, and therefore deferring any discussion of data centers, I would recommend, because we in fact do have a moratorium. And the memo I have proposed contains a dozen or so exhibits, and I'm going to ask Fletcher to help me put that together for the supervisor and him, for Fletcher and for the executive committee. That should be done before the end of this week, hopefully, no later than the beginning of next week. It's going to take time to digest these materials. This is an incredibly complex issue. It is an issue of approach and cost shifting. The errors from my standpoint that I've seen with small communities is the cost of the regulation and proceeding with a application and a data center ordinance. The approach I suggested in my memo provides an efficient, transparent, cost-effective solution to a very difficult and complex and expensive problem and issue, but provides a cost shifting for the purpose of providing the necessary resources that are needed for the benefit of all the residents in Dexter Township. We are a small, small township. So Saline faces a $16 billion project. If we don't approach this in a manner that provides transparency, fairness, balance, and defensibility, we are going to make a big mistake. So what I would encourage is a deferral, as has been suggested by Fletcher, of any discussion until after my memo is given to Fletcher and the exhibits prepared. I'm going to address it to the supervisor and elected official and the executive committee, because I believe that is part of the chain of command that I have a lot of respect for. And I think it's for them to determine what, if anything, should be done with that memo. All right?
Thank you, Mr. Spiegel. DPZ Rare, do you have anything you wish to add at this point?
I'd just like to add to members of the public, thank you for coming out this evening. There are currently no proposals for a data center in Dexter Township. I want to make that clear. The Township Board made a proactive decision to initiate a moratorium for this new and emerging land use due to proposals and ongoing construction in and around Washtenaw County and the state of Michigan. I do think it would be beneficial to hear from members of the public today and get their comments, as well as briefly go through language today. Like I had mentioned earlier, July is going to be a heavy month with this ordinance in particular, and our legal team will be present at that meeting as well. I would suggest thinking of any questions you may have for them, which I can present over the course of the next few weeks before we prepare next month's PC packet. If you would like, Brady could briefly go through some of the changes made since last time we met. We could answer any questions you may have and then take comment from the public today.
Thank you, DPZ Rare. Before I give Brady the floor, I do have one question. Do you anticipate that our next meeting, which will be with our attorneys and hopefully Mr. Spiegel, Mr. Kissinger, and other interested parties, do you expect that meeting to be in the concept of a public hearing regarding data centers? Or do you see it more as a preliminary to a public hearing?
Preliminary to a public hearing. If I had to, I think in the next handful of meetings, maybe 2 to 3 meetings, we may be in the position to have a public hearing. However, the township's going to continue outreach to the public. We would like them to be part of these discussions before we even get to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You did.
Ready? Would you care to take the floor, sir?
All right, good evening. These are the edits that were made based off of feedback from the May 12th working session. Just a brief high-level summary. I expanded standard 5 to include preservation of agricultural heritage, protection of natural resources, traffic management, future development, planning, and sustainability. Definitions, I did include some graphics to kind of summarize what would be considered as a high resource demand facility. However, I did keep it a little brief because one of the questions that we need to discuss and potentially in front of the attorney is what would we categorize as a high resource demand facility. So the districts permitted in process, the language was revised to state that the township board may approve with conditions, or deny a site plan for the special land use request along with data centers. And then the dimensional standards, it was all modified to follow the commercial standards, and the 50-foot green belt was more focusing on natural resources protection and adequate screening. The site design standards, it was modified to focus more on the screening of the building and the protection of natural resources rather than the architecture of the building. And for viewpoints along the main road, and if they're close to residential. Performance standards, it was rewritten to kind of give them an option to include renewable energy and the renewable energy resources that they can do based off of what the ordinance says in different sections. Monitoring and reporting, there was some additional reporting standards added, including waste and heat recovery, hazardous material disposal, and fire protection and emergency response. Decommissioning, those were changed to match decommissioning standards throughout the township.
There was a lot of decommissioning concerns among this group in particular. MAP actually just released their latest magazine regarding data centers. I'll share with you all a copy of that. But technology is changing fast, and 5-10 years from now, the data centers we're seeing may be obsolete, and we may be seeing a vast amount of these large scale data centers being decommissioned. So this is one item in particular we really need to hone in on and get our legal counsel's opinion on, because we need to be protected in the event where data center locates here and then leaves 5 years, a decade later. We need a mechanism to remove that building in its entirety.
And then going off of that, there was like a community benefits section at the last meeting that was rewritten to be a risk mitigation, because there was a couple of an attorney reviewed it. This language was taken from a different data center ordinance in Pittsfield. They reviewed it. They had concerns about it. And so it was rewritten as a risk mitigation section. And the section L7, which had like a community benefits section, that was removed because we can't require them to we can't ask them to do off-site improvements unless if they want to themselves. Standards, it was cross-referenced with the special land use standards in section 28.03. And then there was a new violations and penalties, suspension and revocation of permit section. Basically stating what would happen if they don't comply with this ordinance and the other sections within our zoning ordinance.
And again, Foster Swift has a copy of this. I'm excited to hear back from them and get feedback on all of this language and to work with them throughout the rest of this process and reviewing and adapting an ordinance.
And one additional comment, there are two maps provided with the 500-foot buffer, because I know at the last working session, there was a concern like, do those parcels exist? And with 500-foot buffer from agriculture, lakes residential, rural residential, and open space communities. The commercial district that you are looking at up here on Haggerty and North Territorial and Dexter Pinckney, that could be a suitable spot for an overlay once we get feedback from the legal counsel.
And one thing to keep in mind is, current language has targeted the commercial district in the township as a potential suitable location. A large swath of that is actually being turned into a conservation easement. So what's being indicated on the map provided today is actually a little smaller than what will be available in the coming months. But we can revise that map to show that easement in place. Yeah, and with the commercial district and the overlay being proposed, just so this group is aware, one of the risks that the township has with this is a developer seeking the rezoning of adjacent lots to capture more available land for a facility like this. So that's something to consider. However, the amount of commercial space in this township is quite limited.
Okay, well, thank you, DPZ Rare. I presume that our next activity then will be to open the floor to the planning commissioners. Any questions regarding the document that we have been provided? And I'm assuming that any questions that we have regarding this document will be then transmitted to the attorneys for their incorporation. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Commissioner Straub.
Mr. Chair, I have a few more substantive issues and a few other, typos, inconsistencies, things like that. I suggest that maybe it's not worth taking everybody's time for those, because this document could be reviewed, rewritten, edited. after legal counsel takes a look at it. So if I could just touch upon some of the bigger issues, Fletcher and Brady already mentioned, consistent with what I was concerned about with large scale renewable energy sites. Somehow we've got to protect ourselves for the eventuality that you just mentioned. This is kind of a fad now. The next super duper faster something comes by and all this, this went from University of Michigan Computing Center when I was in school to, the power that's in my telephone now. So when this thing eventually does go away, I get it, there's a bond. My concern has always been that my experience with the performance bond, if a person stops paying for that or somebody goes defunct, same thing with letter of credit. If it's an irrevocable letter of credit backed by somebody that's got deep pockets, but we just talked about, the so-called barn over in Saline Township, the largest single investment in the state of Michigan's history, I guess. I can't imagine who could guarantee enough money to deconstruct something like that, but I'd like to see the attorney's opinion on how we're able to tie that up. Along those lines, when something does get deconstructed on the next page, page 4, so we're 33 of 59 in the packet, a minimum depth of 36 inches. I question why not 42 or 48. You couldn't even, with 36 inches, you couldn't even put post in for a pole barn after that thing leaves, and you certainly wouldn't have sufficient footings for, presumably it's going to be commercial land. If the thing gets deconstructed, somebody might financially then, to benefit the township, need to build a commercial building on there. So I think we need to go deeper than that when we abandon. Some of the other stuff I think is just consistency. I think some places we say on page 11, we talk about 400 feet. On page 12, we talk about 500 feet. I think somebody just ought to figure out what that is and if it's actually defensible. When we get down to page 15, so 44, 59 of the packet, up at the top, D, vibration. Operation shall not cause perceptible vibration at or beyond the property line per ANSI and ISO criteria. In addition to that, I would also like to consider the more airborne types of vibration, so buzz and hum, which are sometimes overlooked in something like this. And I think I mentioned in a previous meeting, I'm not sure how we would enforce that. Probably a question for the attorney, at least until any of these things get tested in real life in the courts. But it seems to me that someplace in here, the applicant should pay for baseline testing. So we can prove that before this thing, there was not a vibration, there was not a hum, there was not, a buzz. There are hums and buzzes in addition to vibrations that a long distance away can keep somebody awake at night, really affects their quality of life. And I think the only way that, assuming that's enforceable at all, I think the only way that could be proven is if it's baseline tested before something turns on that, for whatever reason, can never actually be turned off. It's going to melt down, or national security, or whatever the issues might be. But I think on a high level, those are my main comments with what's before us. Thank you very much for putting that together.
Thank you, Commissioner Straub. Anyone else?
I would say that I'd like to be, I'd be very interested to hear what the township attorney says regarding holding someone to decommissioning. The pockets are so deep with these pushers of these data centers that, I mean, let's look at corporations and the history of corporations. Many corporations have poisoned our waters because the fine is cheaper than following the rules. And that concerns me, that it's just going to be cheaper to pay the bond or pay whatever they have to pay to not do what we want them to do. And I don't think that that's fair to the residents. So that's going to be something that I would like that the township attorney to come with a solid plan of what they believe we would do to hold their feet to the fire when it comes to decommissioning.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Along those same lines, I think one of the issues that we have seen in other communities, even across the nation, and even prior to modern times with data centers, we've seen it with landfills and other, not in my backyard type issues, that people within a certain radius of it are still screwed. But you get a little distance out and, oh my gosh, these, the people that build whatever, fill in the blank, are providing new fire halls, fire equipment, township halls, community centers, pools, schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and buying favor, really establishing an adversarial neighbor versus neighbor where we're not all in this together. If you share a fence with them, your interest may be much different than a couple miles away where you're going to be the beneficiary of all this nifty stuff that they're going to provide the local community. So I think that goes kind of along the lines of what Commissioner Abbott is getting at. Yeah, everything appears one way until somebody waves enough money in front of it, and they seem to have unlimited money to do that. And we don't have to look but a few miles away where that seems to pretty much have been the case.
And I'll certainly pose that question to the attorneys about community benefits, how far we can go out breaking the law.
Quite the way to put that, Fletcher.
Community benefits is a great question. We just need to avoid a taking, essentially. And I'm sure Foster Swift has dealt with this specific questions many times over. And I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I could ask Fletcher and or Brady a question. Has anybody heard anything about any movement by the state legislature to effectively usurp local authority like they did with the large scale renewable energy installations? The governor has spoken very glowingly of these things. Even the president, I think, did, at least briefly. And okay, in the overall scheme of things, I don't know, little old me, okay, maybe we need data centers in the US because if not, some unfriendly foreign country is going to spy on all of our data as it goes through there. But is this gonna end up in a situation where legislature a level or two above little old Dexter Township is gonna say, okay, you guys have like 5 things you can request, but it's going in regardless?
I have not heard any rumblings in Lansing about that in particular. The only conversations in Lansing I've heard about is a potential statewide moratorium, but that does not have those conversations have stalled pretty much.
All right, thank you.
Like those utilities, renewables, people could potentially make the argument that it's a needed utility and could supersede local approvals and regulations, but as of now,
Thanks.
Another question I have, and this is just a little nitpicky one. I was reading to my husband, I was reading my husband that little section about commercial zone parcels, corner of Dexter Pickney Road, and North Territorial can hold a data center with a 500-foot distance from parcels. And the first thing my husband said was, where are they gonna get the water? So I would be curious where, since there's large quantity, what is it, 100 gallons a day is necessary? Like, where is that gonna come from? We do not have municipal water here.
Mr. Chair. And I had this along those same lines, one of the part, it mentions sanitary sewer. And, we also don't have true sanitary sewers. That area would have a septic tank. And you can even have a septic field with a facility like this, or with, that's not all that far down the road from the Portage Baseline Lake Sewer. Is that something that could even hold any sort of capacity for an operation like this?
I actually, and I don't know if this is true, but it seemed like one of our guests at our master plan review meeting was explaining to us that multi-lakes, that sewer line is all the way down North Territorial. I don't know how far, but I mean, he said it goes all the way down, and I'm not sure if that's true, but if it is, they could tap in to it.
So, like you had mentioned, currently there's no access to water at that intersection. Might be access to sewer, maybe a connection could be feasible, especially for a large company that builds data centers. But ultimately, we would need to be sure that the water use, or the water is available and would not be detrimental to
River.
property owners nearby, the river, the township at large, depending on how they get that water, whether through well or through extending services through the township.
Yeah, that makes me, when I read that, I envision the river over here completely being dried up. That's scary.
Sure. Along those lines, there are probably different ways that you can get around that the water, if it's used for cooling, and I don't remember, it was one of the architects on the planning commission that mentioned at a previous meeting about, heat pollution, but the water would come in from wherever, whether it's a body of water or from underground, be used to cool, and then presumably put back in from whence it came at a higher temperature. Or with even more massive amounts of electricity, you could have chillers, refrigeration systems, stuff like that. But along those lines, I'm starting, to kind of remember, just because the state of the technology now is that, oh yeah, you can bring that in and you can re-inject it back into the ground. We don't have to look any farther than Gilman Sciences, where at the time they were injecting those chemicals deep into the ground. That was the government approved, if not mandated, way to get rid of that. And it's never going to be a problem because it's down there so far, nothing can ever happen with it. And well, what do you know? So the what we don't know about some of current state of the art or state of the technology is also something that we should be concerned about.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Meyer.
I had a question about, and this is for the attorneys when they do their review, because when we first started looking at this, we had a draft or ordinance from Howell that was specific to data centers. And now we've gone more with the, the high resource demand facility. But then within the text we have, it basically says general warehousing is excluded, and then it mentions data centers. So it still kind of reads to me like a data center ordinance. But, and I'm not saying we should get into every permutation you could possibly have, but I looked online at what else is considered these types of facilities. And one thing Mr. Spiegel mentioned is crypto mining or cyber mining, indoor vertical farms, quantum research hubs, wind tunnels, and genomic sequencing labs. So I'm not saying we should try to regulate all that, but just in terms of, since there is all these different types of facilities, that the ordinance is broad enough that would encompass any sort of currently unanticipated future use.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Berry.
one small item, I think, well, maybe not so small. Insofar as we can require testing for things like sound, other forms of potential pollution. I think it's important for us to specify that the testing be done by a third party, not an in-house engineer. I noticed that it's not mentioned here. And I'm sure council would agree with that, but I don't know how that would be done. So that's a question for council to make sure that it's third party tested.
And in addition to that, every study produced, reviewed by an expert who can comment on said review. And for the cost of said review to be recouped during the fees and review stage.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith.
I don't know if this is appropriate or not. Could we require that all of this testing, whatever we're calling it, somehow be public? From an accountability standpoint, we're telling them they have to test, but we're not necessarily talking about mechanisms of what to do with that information. I don't know if that's something that we can mandate, but considering that all of our enforcement is by people complaining. So yeah, people could complain about noise, but how would we ever know if they're complying with the testing requirements and what the results of those tests are?
So those would be public it would be in the planning commission packet. So somebody would submit a proposal with their studies, township staff, consultants would review all of that and provide comments. Those test results, along with our comments, would be provided to the public at every stage of the process.
So is that just in the approval process, or that's in the operational process also?
That's a great question. I believe in this ordinance, we did ask for annual testing and for those results to be given to the township. I don't believe it specified that it needed to be public though, but through a FOIA request, somebody could obtain that, but maybe we should include that, testing information can be accessed by the public.
That would be my preference. If we're able to start expressing preferences now, that would be mine. The other element along with that is you just rattled off a list of a lot of things that have to be done. So at what point is a facility of this size and scale putting a burden on staff and township resources? I understand there's a public element to that's why township is here, for the benefit of the public, and that's what our taxes and everything goes to. But is it becoming disproportionate? And that's, I think, one of the other commissioners made that comment that we need to be not just looking at who's more heavily impacted or less heavily impacted, but that also comes into play about should one project be eating up 95% of our resources, staff resources and time and cost. And when I say taking that time, I don't just mean in the approval process and review. I mean in the operation and the lifespan of the facility. So that's a comment, if we can carry that forward, or seeking advice from council on how best we can incorporate or factor those elements, if they should be into our ordinance that we're looking at, or are there companion ordinances that we should be looking at as part of the bigger picture here? And then the other thing that I would just say is, I know we've put a lot of time into this document that we have in front of us, but I'll just be really curious to see if new council feels that we're moving in the right direction, if there's a different direction we should be moving. Because I think Commissioner Straub just gave us sort of that perfect quote of what we don't know. There's so much here that we don't know, but at the same time, we can only create ordinances about what we know about. We're talking about what are these things that we know. So how do we create an ordinance that works for things we don't know? And especially with still maintaining our transparency and our, whatever all the legal terms are for the things that we have to do that isn't exclusionary, I feel like, given a harder burden than the applicant in that scenario would be. So how can we take this opportunity? I mean, I see it as a phenomenal opportunity, not just for us as a group, for you as staff, for the council that we're working with, because we don't have to be the first. Celine got to go through that. So how can we really learn? How can we be wise? And how can we, I think, we have public that's giving us great questions and comments. And so we have an opportunity here to really, really do something good and right for the township. So anything we can do, I'm open to hear and would excited to see this where it can go. Thank you.
Some of the language in here in terms of the setbacks references medical clinic and medical center. Do we define that in our ordinance anywhere? That is.
Let me look real quick. It doesn't look like we do currently. So we would want to define those. Currently, medical offices are listed land use in the ordinance, not large scale facilities. So think of like a dental office or a small care facility.
Well, I think there's a care facility along Dexter Pinckney, and there's a dentist. And then when this first came up with one of the other versions of the ordinance, some places just also include veterinarians, and there is a veterinarian over there off North Territorial. So there's a number of what I'd consider medical facilities around that area in terms of getting a setback. And I don't know if the attorneys would weigh in on whether a veterinarian is actually considered a medical clinic.
An excellent question.
That veterinary practice is not open anymore.
I think they still board dogs.
It used to be my vet. The veterinary part is not operational anymore, though.
Further questions, members of the? Mr. Kissinger?
Hi, Paul Kissinger, 9841 Grand River Drive. Just a couple of thoughts on on page 12, which is page 41 of 59 on the site and design standards. I'm just curious if there's an opportunity to be a little bit more specific. Item number 1, the building shall be designed to reduce the perceived size and visual properties of structures as viewed from adjacent properties and public rights of way. How? It's very vague, and I mean, one of the things that I might suggest is you put and I think this really helps with neighborhood compatibility. I still think you might want to consider weaving that in, because there's not a lot of things that are going to be compatible with these data centers. So this site design standards is going to be very important, I believe. But as building size, it can't be any bigger than 150 by 150 or 200 by 200. We don't want to see something that's 500 feet by 500 feet. These things are that big. So really think about limiting size. And I think there was a previous version, I think there was something about also. So be a bit more specific potentially on the reducing the perceived size and visual prominence of the structures. So be more specific. The next one, and really all of these, I think there's an opportunity to be much more specific as it relates to design and building massing in design. And then the other one that came up was buildings shall be designed to provide visual interest and a human scale appearance along public street frontages and at primary points of visibility. But then we're also talking about a greenway and a green belt and a setback. And do we really want to have buildings like this, as I say, meet the street? Do we really want to see these at all? We want to, I think the intention is that if these things do come up, high resource facilities, they're behind a setback and they're behind a green buffer. So we don't want them to meet the street. So the idea of having provide visual interest and human scale appearances along public street frontages, if there was one on North Territorial and Dexter Pinckney, that would say that, oh, we want to have a building front one of those streets and it ought to look nice. And I think we want to say, no, we don't want to see a building. So I just think there's some clarity with respect to that. Multiple buildings within the same development should incorporate common design elements, materials, colors, and performance-graded coordinated campus appearance. I think you could probably go further with more architectural examples of how you can be more compatible with those smaller buildings. And then also, again, you don't get to the size of the mass and also the separation. So if this is going to be a campus appearance and there's going to be multiple buildings, then there ought to be adequate space between buildings for landscape, for sidewalks, for a true campus feel, instead of having a bunch of buildings locked together that they don't even have room for trees in between the two. So I think that gets to some of the natural resources. You got to deal with storm drainage and those kinds of things. So I think there's an opportunity to be a little bit more specific with the design standards, and those were just some of the suggestions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Spiegel?
Couple of general thoughts. Joseph Spiegel, 7905. It's a process. We start with the cornerstones. We go to the building blocks. We create an ordinance. But it's the application that is the key element in this entire process. Because Mr. Smith is right. One doesn't know until one is told what the proposals are. And how is that process going to be funded? Keep in mind, if there was any community benefit to a data center, you'd have communities lined up from here to the state line. And they're not. It's the application process that is the key to this entire problem. So ordinance will require an application, and that's going to have other requirements. And it's the source of the resources, as Mr. Smith has pointed out, and Mr. Strong. How's this going to be paid for? What is fair, just, and equitable to be put into the application that the developer is going to have to come up with? That is where the rubber meets the road. Some of that's addressed in my memo. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments or questions from the planning commissioners on what we want the attorneys to help us out with?
Hey, if I may, I had one more sort of maybe off the wall question. This is just a process question. So we have a standard, we have a site planning process. I think that this would have to go through. And in that site planning process, we have opportunities for public to speak. But with a project of this scale, just like we do for our master planning committees, our short-term rental committees, we're actually able to appoint members of the public to help advise us, to help organize, to be the experts that can help us weigh and consider these types of issues. Is there a way to include public officially in a site planning process?
That's a great question for the attorney. I don't know.
So as it stands currently, like you had mentioned, site plan process, special land use process on top of that, public hearings, et cetera. I believe there is a way to include some type of community engagement meetings, potentially paid for by the developer, but we'll need to review that with the legal team and make sure we're within our rights as a community to ask them to do that. And I think that would be beneficial to have as many chances for the public to speak as possible.
And the reason that I'm asking for this is we know that, as again was demonstrated in Saline, an applicant has tremendous expert resources who can spend a lot of time preparing information. You know, we're sitting here trying to jot notes and throw ideas to help us write an ordinance in our spare time. If something of this scale was in front of us, it would be nice to know that we had opportunities to take in other information, other folks that are willing to help out, so that we are effectively representing the township well. Because I don't feel, to be honest, I feel like if we were hit with something like Saline has, we'd just be run over. We need to have a fighting chance. And it's not we, the members of this commission, it's we as representatives of the entire township.
Sure. As the draft is currently written, the applicant would be required to create a community engagement plan as a part of their submittal and to host a community meeting prior to the public here at the township. We can look at potentially expanding this process a bit and encouraging more community input as a part of this process.
Okay, thank you. And in that, again, the element that I would really be after is knowing that we're able to bring in or ask other township residents to become part of this. So not just to show up and speak, but if we wanted, you know, a couple of ad hoc members or form a little subcommittee or something along those lines so that we really are empowering them to act with us. Thank you.
Mr. Strong.
Mr. Chair, what Commissioner Smith just said kind of reminds me, I mean, point is great, it's well taken. Historically, because we're a little old Dexter Township, we haven't usually been the first at anything. And by the time something gets down to little old Dexter Township, we've been the beneficiaries of other units of government, other townships that have already dealt with the issue. They've already had ordinances in place that probably have been tested and withstood court challenges. They've proven to be effective. And whether anybody is targeting us for a data center or not, we're kind of hanging out there at the very leading edge. If there has been somebody that has come before us that has successfully dealt with it, and I don't think we want to legally define what successful is, but we know that in some cases it's hard to even influence some of these things. So maybe new legal counsel has some experience in that and has kind of a model ordinance, but I doubt that anybody has one that has been tested and proven to be effective. So yeah, here we are. We're doing the best we can, making it up as we go along.
Yeah, there are more members of the audience. Maybe we open the floor up to any additional comments.
No, thank you. Sure.
Good evening, my name is John Secchi, I live on 8944 Dexter Gables Lane in the township here. First and foremost, thank you for all you guys are doing. I really appreciate this the first time that I've seen you in person. I've seen it with a Zoom meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't ask questions on the Zoom meeting. It's just a one-way. So if we get a data center, will you please allow us to have two-way communication? No, it's just a joke. I read about this advisory committee for the master plan. How is it that I could be involved in something like this? I like the idea of community involvement, which Sean just brought up. How is this structured? Is this possible?
I believe since I was the person that created the master plan review committee, yes, it is possible. The best way to find out if you are interested in a particular area is to probably contact Mr. Rare and let him know that you have interest in township business in general or some specific issue. And then DPZ can give that information to the relevant person.
Okay, thank you.
Is it okay if I say something, Mr. Chair?
Go for it.
One of the things that you could do also is if you wanted to attend like the master plan review committee meetings, they're informal, similar to how the planning commission works, where we allow public participation as each topic comes up. And we had a meeting last week and we had a gentleman attend and he really was a value to the meeting. So I would implore you to come to one of those. Our next one is in August. And come and be part of the process, because we do like to include the public that show up as part of that process. And also to your comment about the Zoom, making it two-way, I know that that is something that is being looked into.
The other thing is I have a question in regards to the 180-day moratorium, which I'm not clear about. Is the moratorium for the database or for a specific land use, one or two? How is that moratorium set up?
Moratorium set up for any application for a proposed data center. We cannot intake any application or review anything during that time. While we have a chance to review regulations and adopt something.
So data center, is that the blanket of all these other names that they could come up with? So,
The resolution was drafted by our legal team, and we were confident that it encompassed data centers and similar uses.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms.
actually have a follow-up from Ms. Abbott. So remember when you had the short-term rental committee? Did you, sometimes is there like postings on the website that says you're seeking members?
Well, I don't know that we're seeking members for master plan review.
No, but for other committees, like hasn't that happened in the past? Like.
Yes,
thinking about,
yeah,
like,
they
multi
do,
roads. Yeah.
they put it on the website, there are times where it goes out into the Sun Times News that that these are committee spaces that we have, so, there may be actual available committees that have empty seats that could use a resident who wants to get involved. I only suggested that he come to the master plan review because he mentioned master plan, and we did have someone in attendance who was really very valuable in a lot of our discussions that evening. Much like Mr. Kissinger, who comes to our planning commission meetings, gives us very valuable input, Mr. Spiegel, and so it's really nice to have residents come and participate during the meetings.
Any rest of the public care to address us before we move on from this topic? And see negative head shakes. I will ask one more time, one final opportunity to provide to our DPZ any other questions or comments you wish to be shared with our new attorneys. Hearing none, we will proceed to the approval of the planning commission meeting minutes of May 26. Does anyone have any additions, deletions, or other changes that she or he wishes to make to the minutes of Tuesday, May 26th? Hearing none, the floor will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting on Tuesday, May 26th as presented.
I'll move, Mayor.
Second.
By
Barry.
Been moved by Commissioner Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Berry to approve the regular meeting minutes of the Planning Commission Tuesday, May 26th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries, minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is back to our DPZ. Any correspondence, sir?
Yep. On your desk in front of you is correspondence from Putnam Township. They are proposing updates to their master plan. And you can access that draft master plan on their website. In addition to that, there is a memo from Foster Swift regarding the changes to the State of Michigan Land Division Act and how it may affect Dexter Township. I'd encourage you to read through that and get back with me with any questions you may have about that.
Thank you, DPZ Rare. Commissioner Abbott, as our esteemed township board representative, do you have any update for us?
Yes, planning commission, or not planning, I'm sorry, Board of Trustees met last Tuesday. The regular business, but we did vote and pass resolution 26-708. This is the quick put. It's opposing the use of township buildings and face coverings by immigration and custom enforcement officers. And this was important because we want the township to be a safe space and people to feel free to come and vote and not feel like they would be afraid to come and exercise their right to vote. We also passed resolution 26-709 supporting LGBTQ. And this resolution is affirming township's commitment to equal treatment, non-discrimination, and community inclusion for all residents, all Dexter Township residents. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Abbott.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Swell.
Question for trustee Abbott. Has the township board been involved with taking any formal position or plan on taking any formal position on the what apparently is a large scale natural gas electricity generation installation
Are you talking
by
about?
Consumers Power in Lima Township?
I don't know that we can take any action on that. I think that we also, my understanding from Supervisor Scott in the meeting is that he said utility companies like DTE and Consumer Energy operate under a state standard, and that a lot of times there isn't anything we can do.
Well, there's anything, and you can take a position just as the township can take a position on other things that they have zero authority over.
Oh, so do you mean like we are against it and we are in support of Lima Township to?
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
yes, we are, yes.
I was just wondering if there's been any formal action like that where townships are trying to band together
Yeah.
and influence that decision. Well, I'm not sure it's a decision yet, but
Well, yeah.
influence where that
Right.
goes.
I thought you meant in actually
No,
fighting Consumers Energy. No, we stand in support of Lima Township.
and
that-
has that been
that's-
formalized somehow, a letter to
It-
Lima Township?
I believe it is. I believe
Letter to
it's,
consumers?
I believe it is in process right now.
Great, thank you.
Further questions for trustee Abbott? Okay, concerns of other planning commission members? Hearing none, Director of Planning and Zoning, do you have any concerns you wish to express?
No concerns at this time.
Thank you, DPZ Rare. Township Supervisor is not in attendance this evening. Recording Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Miller. And our final item of public comment. Does anyone in the public have anything they wish to share with the Planning Commission that has not already been discussed or presented? Hearing none, our future agenda items will be a review and discussion of the special transitory food units, food trucks. Do you, DPZ Rare, do you have any further information you can offer in that area?
No update at the moment. However, staff will be bringing to this commission some potential updates to our current food cart ordinance to modernize that and to be in line with adjacent municipalities and the Washtenaw County.
Thank you, DPZ Ryan. That, ladies and gentlemen, completes our agenda for this evening. The floor will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Stroud. Support,
Smith.
support by Commissioner Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Nay. We are adjourned. Wait. You are not allowed to